Your nickname is
The Prawn King.
Great British Entrepreneur Awards.
Congratulations.
Honorary Masters from University of Derby.
Can you tell that story? It's one of the most powerful human stories I've ever had in my life.
So he accelerates through and they open fire. Bang, bang. So it was supposed to be a 5-day trip to Malaysia, but these fishing boats, they weren't designed to carry so many people. The boat was completely overloaded, and so the engine broke down after just 2 days. We were just floating. It got to a point where the captain was food rationing.
We go back to caveman, hunters, gatherers. Who survived? It was those that would go out and make things happen. Those that waited for food to come to them would never get food.
They wouldn't come back until they made the kill, right?
Your dad didn't settle for that roadblock where other people had gone to that roadblock, not had the papers and disappeared. And he made a balanced decision impulsively, which has led to your life being saved.
It's very cliche to say it's a superpower. I've always known I've had ADHD. I've almost been quite proud of some of the traits I had.
Stephen Ty, welcome.
Thank you.
I genuinely wanted this to happen as a conversation for many reasons. One is the proactive way that you approached me to talk about possible ADHD, which we'll talk about. And then, if I may, your life backstory, which gets us to where we are today, which is just one of the most incredible life backstories I've ever heard. You don't really know John in that depth, and you've got some enlightenment coming, I think, in this conversation. Exciting. But there's something to talk about that's slightly unusual. First of all, recognizing what a successful man you are. That's not unusual. We deal with a lot of successful people, entrepreneurs, businessmen. Your nickname is?
The Prawn King.
The Prawn King. And how you got to be one of the leading importers and distributors of prawns in the UK is a journey in itself. But I want to go back, way back, and you know where I'm going to go, way back to that eventful journey in your life that I think just sets a tone for who you are and who your family values, where your family values come from. Is that okay?
Yeah, sure.
Can you tell that story? Because it's one of the most powerful human stories I've ever had in my life. And the reason I think it's relevant, just before I start you off on it, is what your dad did is indicative of ADHD in an extreme. And we'll pick that up as well.
Okay.
Go for it.
So I'll go forward just a few years and just talk about Ocean King, where we are now. So Ocean King has been going 28 years. And we're a food distribution company. We started off with 2 vans, driving around the Midlands, delivering prawns to restaurants and takeaways. And then we recently, 2 years ago, moved to Derby. And Loughborough was 5,500 square feet. Derby is 32,000 square feet. So it was a massive jump, an investment back into the business. But all I knew at that point, was just to sell prawns. And me and my brothers, as each brother left university, they'll join the business and we'll do everything. We'll do everything from the order taking, even IT networking issues. We'll be on the forklift, we'll be there picking, we do the stock check, we even do the deliveries. And it was about 5 years ago, 2020, there was quite a significant event. My father was diagnosed with a non-Hodgkin's lymphoma stage 4. And he was on his hospital bed having chemotherapy. And he was still on his phone, taking orders from his customers and inputting it into the computer system whilst he's having chemotherapy. Looking frail, he'd lost so much weight and he was on his deathbed. And he was still working as hard as I've ever known him. And I said to my brothers, why do we do this? Because all my life, all I've known is this relentless hard work. And growing up, I was very resentful. My parents never made it to any of my parents' evening. at school. They never went to any basketball games. And, growing up with friends around me, the parents were taken to all the sporting activities and even holidays. To this very day, I've never had a family holiday with mum and dad. And, it was one of those moments that...
You were going to break the cycle.
Well, you see, my parents never spoke about why they would do this. Or I just knew that we had to do it. And it took... It's that point then where we thought, okay, we need to change. I mean, at that point, me and brothers, we had kids, and even our wives were going, oh, we're never at home. We were always just working. And so it's, how do we break that cycle? And we got talking. And the thing about it, 2020, it was COVID. And when we went into lockdown, it gave us time to talk about things, anything other than business. Because every time we sat down at dinner, it was like, have you got these prawns in for that customer? It was always business. But then we had real conversations about, okay, I found out that, well, I always known I was born in Vietnam, but I found out that my grandparents were Chinese, and they fled another civil war to go to Vietnam, and everyone knows about the Vietnam War, and that's where I was born. Those conversations, it was quite hard to get out on my parents. There was still any direct questions I had to them, like, so what happened? They'll turn a blank face to it. I mean, it's so extreme. A couple of years ago, my brother took my dad to Vietnam because another brother got married in Hong Kong, and my brother found a store which my granddad had owned in Vietnam, and he did his business from there, and asked my dad to have a picture in front of it. And my dad refused to stand anywhere near it. And again, we'll ask questions, and they just wouldn't say.
Can I take you back to, you told me part of the story, which I'd like to see if we can probe. The roadblock where your life started at when you were on the motor scooter with your parents, and the roadblock.
Yeah.
Take us through there, because that's the first demonstration in your life story that I know of ADHD behaviours for a positive by your dad. Take us to that roadblock, that, as you now know the story.
Yeah, so to get to that roadblock, it's about understanding the desperation people had at that point in time. There was, it was just after the war. And even today, I mean, I went back to Vietnam recently to negotiate my first container of prawns, and just seeing the poverty within these streets. Have you been to the Far East at all? So you'll know they'll sell everything from fake Rolexes, silly umbrella hats, and these people will be selling coffee on the streets for about 5-10 cents a cup. And the things going through a business person mind, how many cups of coffee must you sell to sustain a store, or for a ticket to fly out of there? And you see children working, and it was so relatable, because I've got young children. Well, at that stage, my children were about 4 or 5 years old, and would they have done the same had we stayed there? But back in the mid-70s, I was born in 77, oppression was rife. Like, the politician leaders, religious leaders, entrepreneurs, they were disappearing overnight. And everything, you hear history, what's the word I'm looking for? Repeating
itself, yeah.
Yeah. And, you hear about wars and stuff, and how there was genocide going on with a specific group of people who had fled a Chinese war to start with. And if you know anything about the Vietnam War, it was North versus South, communism against capitalism, Chinese against Americans. And as my grandparents had fled China, there was a distinct group that were being persecuted. And so that takes me to my father's story. And my father's father, my granddad, he had one leg. He stood on a mine during the war. Yeah, he was a businessman. He had a underwear factory, and he'd be distributing underwear that he'd sew from sewing machines in his flat throughout the whole Saigon. And he died when my dad was only 13 years old. I mean, my dad was with 12 siblings and mother to feed. And when you're in the Far East, you see these guys on scooters fully loaded with stock riding through. And this image of my dad when he took the business on. And then when I was born, he described one night, he's just riding through these checkpoints. And I was stood in the footwell. I was 18 months old, just about stand. My mum sat in the back seat, load of stock. And usually he'll just ride through these checkpoints, but there are armed guards on. And one night they halted and wanted to stop him to check paperwork. Of course, my dad was working, he was an entrepreneur, he didn't have paperwork, he wasn't working for the government. And so my dad decided to accelerate because he knew if he stopped, then there's a chance he'd disappear. So he accelerates through and they open fire. Bang, bang. And it was two shots. And be it misfiring or just warning shots, but we're still alive today to tell the story. But it was enough for my parents to shit themselves so much. They sold everything they had for 3 tickets on a boat. And again, history repeating itself, what you've seen in the news nowadays. These boats, there weren't luxury cruise liners, there weren't any seats, there weren't any toilets, there were just fishing boats. And on our boat in particular, there was 600 people just crammed into it. My mum said she held me for the duration of this trip. It was supposed to be a 5-day trip to Malaysia. And she wouldn't let me touch the ground because it was just full.
There was no toilet.
Yeah, no toilet. And babies were dying, they'd been lowered into the sea. So it was supposed to be a 5-day trip to Malaysia, but these fishing boats, they weren't designed to carry so many people. The boat was completely overloaded, and so the engine broke down after just 2 days, and we were just floating. And my parents don't recall how long they were on the boat. It was longer than the 5-day journey. Like, it would have been weeks. And it got to a point where the captain was food rationing. And so many children had died already. It was survival of the fittest, and they didn't see children as likely people to survive, so he rationed out the food only to the adults. So even though we paid for 3 tickets, only my mum and dad got an orange each. And so my mum would describe, like, she'll peel the orange, she'll eat the skin herself, and fed me the flesh just to keep me alive. And one day, luckily, there was a ship that came by. There were many ships that went past, actually. And they described the people on those ships would just turn a blind eye and just carry on going past. But one ship stopped for us, and it was called the Saibonga. I've done a lot of research into it. I thought it was a military ship of some sort. It wasn't. My recent researchers, I found a news clip of this captain being interviewed about why he rescued so many people. His name's Captain Healy Martin, and there's a proper BBC archive video, and it describes how he saw this boat, and for humanity, he couldn't just go past. He had to do something, and he rescued 2 boats that day, 1,003 people.
Yeah, what a human being story that is.
Isn't it, Justin? The first time Steve told that story in my presence, I just took the story as a story on incredible face value, very emotional. And I don't know how you manage to tell that story with a dry eye these days, but it's possibly because you've gone through it so many times and what have you. But I want to take that back and link it back to the ADHD if I can. We talk about many life experiences, and we go back to caveman, hunters, gatherers, who survived. It was those that would go out and make things happen. It was those that actually went and hunted that brought back food. Those that waited for food to come to them would never get food.
And they wouldn't come back until they made the kill, right?
And they continue and show that tenacity. Your dad didn't settle for that roadblock where other people had gone to that roadblock, not had the papers and disappeared. Your dad turned around and saved the life of his family through his actions and his activities. It just strikes me that with the correlation of what's unfolding for you with ADHD, we'll come to that in a second, that your dad's actions as a doer, as a making things happen at that roadblock and then selling everything immediately, getting on that boat, were the actions that we talk about from caveman times of how ADHDers are the survival of those fittest, the Darwinistic approach of where there is a strength. We have light conversations in this, we have heavy conversations, we have emotional conversations, but very rarely do we have a story in life that takes us right back and can correlate right back to where this story of how did ADHD survive, how did the difference survive, that we actually get the opportunity to explore.
It's primitive survival. And
Absolutely.
it brings your mum into it as well.
Yeah.
She would not put you down.
Absolutely.
Self-sacrificial.
It just strikes me when I've heard your story before, then sharing it with other people from the ADHD community and beyond, that when we search sometimes for trivial positives of having ADHD, we sometimes search for banal stories or what have you. And I'm not putting anything down at all, but I think your dad was likely to be ADHD because you are, and he made a balanced decision impulsively, which has led to your life being saved. And then your dad came here. And the other link for me in this, if I can explore it with you, is your dad was super hyper-focused to make it work, wasn't he? Grateful for the opportunity he got. And you talk about your dad going, eventually you boys talking your dad into going on a cruise on holiday. Yeah. And all he did on the cruise was actually monitor the CCTV of the factory to make sure, of the warehouses, to make sure all the lorries were going out on time. Absolute lifelong hyper-focus.
He was living in fight or flight, wasn't he?
Absolutely. And the way your dad conducted himself, if you look at that was he a hyper-focused man who was always going to deliver to the expense of everything else around him? You talk about never being there for you at school. We're just analysing a life at the highest level that could well have been the positives of an ADHD, hyperactivity, impulsive, correct decision-making and what have you. I don't think we'll ever get a human story that has the potential links to ADHD like your story. And now you're going on a journey to discover yourself with your ADHD. I just think out of all of the human power that we've got to tell the story, this is a strong story to unpick and tell. Is that fair?
No, I totally agree. I mean, it goes back to the survival instinct, and it was Professor Dan Nicolau that sat here that said, if the saber-toothed tiger invaded the camp, someone's got to leap up and grab a spear and save the tribe. In the same way, someone's got to go out and make the kill. And I imagine there's a huge amount of gratitude sorry, in your face for saying it, but also you've got to unravel your own fight or flight behaviour, and you described that so well when you were sort of saying, by your father when he was so ill. Have you managed to do that? Have you, from where you were when you were looking at the fact that I don't want to be that guy, but you totally understand why your father was that way, that ultimately you could argue right now you don't need to be. Where are you at? Because you're sort of unpicking a habit that you built and followed from your father.
It's an acceptance of what I am, where I am, where I've come from.
We've talked in other interviews, and what I'm working to with this conversation is there's a whole different level of what is ADHD here going on in this conversation that we've never got to this level before. I've never got to this level as an individual before. Your dad, for whatever reasons, was addicted to making it work now that he got here, I suspect. making business work, to never, ever, ever let anybody down.
Yeah, for me, that's all he's ever known.
Yeah.
Since the age of 13, he knows if he works hard, it will get him through anything. Yeah. And so that's his fallback mechanism. He knows that if he grafted, he was working 3 jobs at one point, then he was providing for a family, and it's given us the life. And he almost was able to see immediately successful what he was doing. He worked in Chinese takeaway, a supermarket, even worked at a morgue at one point. But it was always for the family. It was always to
provide.
Yeah, but for me, the way he brought me up is as the first son in Chinese culture. There's the way I saw it, and that's where that resentment came in, is that there was never any positiveness in how it was always, you got B at school, why didn't you get an A? If you got an A, why didn't you do this? Or it was always something better. So it was always, because they wouldn't let the children to be content. And so it was always that drive, that push, and it's made me who I am today.
So let's look at who you are today, because we haven't got a lot of time left, but there's a very powerful story come out here, and I'm very grateful to you for sharing that. Great British Entrepreneur Awards. You did quite well there.
Great British Entrepreneur, East Midlands, Chambers of Commerce Entrepreneur of the Year, Leicestershire Live Entrepreneur of the Year.
Congratulations.
Honorary Masters from University of Derby.
And look how
all
from the humility in you, I think is amazing. And we've just published a book on ADHD and entrepreneurs. There's no doubt there's a space for you in whatever we do next if you take that space, because the point is, I strongly suspect your dad's decision making back in those early days was powered, driven partly because of who he was with. It wouldn't have been ADHD, called that in Vietnam in those days, but there'll have been something in your dad that was that fight or flight, and I'm not going to give in, I'm not going to be disappeared, I'm going to save my family. Then there's your mum and dad on that journey, and there's now you. Those awards don't come from nowhere, they don't come. And what we give is hope. And there'll be young people, old people who've never heard your story, never understood the Vietnamese boat people's story, never understood the emotion and the family emotion in that story, just knew it was news. In my mind, there's an ADHD correlation to that. In my mind, you're an ADHD-based entrepreneur of huge success, a killer in your field. You call yourself the Prawn King. I think you do. You do. Look at that cheeky smile that you got. Yeah, but you deserve that title. And you deserve that title with your dad. And I think ADHD has played a part in that survival. That's my point of this story. Does that make sense?
Great. So can I ask you one thing? And it's to do with love. What your father and your mother did that ultimately saved your life, risking their own and taking disproportionate risks that ended up meaning that he has lived a constant life of fight or flight. And that, you used that word resentment, where his love for you meant that he's probably not known how to show it to you. So his love for you kind of saved your life, and then has allowed the business to kind of be built up to win these awards and so on. But you as Stephen, now a dad, married, and had that sort of moment to reflect, which, to be fair, your dad probably never did and has never allowed himself to. I just want to know whether that, I use that term, breaking the cycle. Where are you at with how you kind of love your kids now? Do you know where I'm going with that?
Yes.
It feels like you've got that emotional intelligence now.
So it's a full circle for me in that understanding this story, knowing the risks that my parents took. I understand why they never spoke about it. There's an element of that shame of being a refugee, firstly, and then secondly, or the post-traumatic stress they went through has stopped them from telling the story. But that resentment I had has actually turned into immense appreciation for the risk they took. And it's helped me shape my life into what we do. So in terms of the business, creating opportunities and enriching lives, that's our company mission. But what can we do to make you better by walking through the doors of Ocean King? Because we know that this country has given us opportunity where we didn't have any opportunity left. And there's so much life. And so what can we do to make the community better? What can we do to make anyone better by giving an opportunity? And for me, I've just spoke about the awards that I've had, but I do things with Young Enterprise. I'm ambassador for them. I speak on stage. I'm on Business and Law Advisory Board for Development University as well. And I've been a governor for a primary school for many years, for my children's school. I've been a football coach for my son's team. I never miss any of his football matches. My daughters swim at galas. I wish I could miss them, but I have to go and watch them, every single one. And I've taken her to all the dance clubs, baby century clubs.
So my question. So you have broken
that full circle has come round, and it's about what I can do for my family to give back and be appreciative of this life that I've been given. So, but before I move on, because that's where the story comes round, and that's broken the circle, and that's where it is. But it's cliche that I'm touching on what you were talking about, being ADHD being this high level thing. It's very cliche to say it's a superpower. And for me, going on the journey I've just recently been on the last 5 years, discovering where I've come from and having an understanding of how to lead people, how I could do better for myself. I've always known I've had ADHD, and I've almost been quite proud of some of the traits I had. My ability to go into a room and talk to people, the ability to do that firefighting when it's what's it called when you've got a lot of things happening, critical.
So you're great in a crisis.
Yeah, crisis management. Yeah. And I thought that was my skill set. I'm able to do things that some of my brothers aren't able to do because of the way I see things. Mm-hmm. And when I came to you initially, I was concerned about, all right, I know it's there, but the level to which I moved to now, I'm not firefighting anymore. I'm trying to be more strategic, and we're really trying hard to be. Look at things at a slightly higher level, and where am I taking the business, where am I taking my people, and what am I doing to the community, and being able to have that focus where it is very specific, and I could start a sentence and finish it, or start a task and finish it. This is where I'm at now, because I'm not in that firefighting mode, and I have time to think about things. I can't think about it.
Sadly, we've run out of time in this. And what I would say to wrap this up is, you truly are a British entrepreneur with ADHD, and you should be, with your dad, really, really proud of those achievements. And it's not about value in the bank, it's about value as a human. You've got a huge human value set, which I really respect. And I'm really chuffed that we've managed to capture that on this programme.
100%.
Thank you.
Well done, mate.